Good evening and welcome. Tonight we're going to read another chapter out of the world's most mysterious places. Tonight we're going to read chapter 2, Lost and Found Cities. Let's just dive right in. We read that one already. Here we go. Lost and Found Cities. Pirate booty. And I'll get my pointer out too to help us read. Port Royal may not be much to look at today, but 400 years ago, this quiet fishing village on Jamaica's southern coast was the largest city in the Caribbean. It was so infested by murderous pirates and outlaws that it was called the wickedest city on earth. It was in Spanish hands until the 1650s, when it was invaded by the English, who used it to control shipping and commerce and as a hub for the slave trade. The Brits brought in some of history's most infamous pirates, including the notorious Blackbeard, to protect their investments and wreak havoc on the Spanish colonies in the name of king and country. In the process, they got rich and lived a life of excess in a city built on the spoils of relentless plundering. These buccaneers had a free hand to literally do as they pleased, as they were viewed as being the defenders of Jamaica, local historian Peter Gordon explained to the BBC. But the city that was destined to become the inspiration for an attraction at Disney World would have a short life. On June 7th, 1692, an earthquake caused Port Royal to sink into the sea, and 2,000 of its 6,500 residents perished. Despite the tragedy, the submerged ruins remain largely intact, not far beneath the water surface, providing a vivid time capsule of the debauched Pompeii of the Caribbean. Archaeology teams have excavated paved streets, archways, and even buildings that are virtually unscathed. Now the Jamaican government is offering divers special permission to explore the ruins. Sylvanus Walters of the Jamaica National Trust told the BBC, "It is believed to be one of the best conserved underwater heritage sites in this hemisphere." Next we have the original monster of the Midway. Nearly 500 years before Columbus set foot in the New World, North America was home to one of the largest and most cosmopolitan cities in the world. Around the year 1000, the Native American metropolis of Cahokia in Illinois was a cultural and trade mecca that boasted a population upward of 20,000 people. It stood just 8 miles from what is now St. Louis and featured broad plazas and massive buildings constructed atop towering earthen mounds, the largest of which, Monk's Mound, was 100 feet high and still exists today. Research shows that the city was an ancient New York, a melting pot of a diverse group of people from the Mississippi Valley and beyond. But just 350 years after its founding, it was mysteriously abandoned. For centuries, it was mostly forgotten by historians. Theories point to flooding or the exhaustion of natural resources as the cause of its demise, but the culprit might be disturbingly more modern: violent political unrest. It was a large population composed of immigrants from the mid-continent who brought very different practices and beliefs to the city, said archaeologist Thomas Emerson on History.com, and he believes it collapsed under political, religious, and ethnic conflicts. Today, Monk's Mound is the centerpiece of a 3.5 square mile historic site with 72 surviving mounds and a museum visited by 250,000 people each year. Next is Egypt's ancient metropolises. Established 2,700 years ago on Abu Qir Bay near Alexandria, Egypt, where the Nile meets the Mediterranean, the cities of Thonis Heraklion and Eastern Canopus were built on a series of islands and muddy riverbanks intersected by canals. The two towns served as the country's cosmopolitan gateway of commerce with Greece and the rest of the West. Both were also significant religious holy lands, with temples attracting thousands of pilgrims annually. But even as their commercial prominence grew, over the centuries they would be ravaged by earthquakes, tsunamis, and rising sea levels. By the end of the 2nd century BCE, flooding caused the hard clay soil beneath them to liquefy, and their magnificent buildings, statues, and temples subsequently tumbled into the sea, a fate that scientists believe may be the demise of a similarly constructed and sinking city, Venice, Italy. Knowledge of their grandeur was limited to ancient historians until 1933, when their murky outlines were spotted by a Royal Air Force pilot flying over Abu Qir Bay. Nearly 70 years later, in 2000, French archaeologist Franck Godiot discovered 2 sets of ruins with temples, columns, and colossal statues, along with ships, anchors, and gold coins, buried in sand under 23 feet of cloudy water. They continue to be excavated today. And next is the Holy Wetland. About half a mile off the coast of the thriving city of Haifa in northern Israel, and about 30 feet below the surface of the Mediterranean Sea, lies the startlingly well-preserved 9,000-year-old fishing village of Atlit Yam. The site was discovered in 1984 by marine archaeologist Ehud Galilee. Later excavations revealed undisturbed stone houses, human skeletons, and a mysterious stone circle that still stands where it did when it was first built. And according to Galilee and other experts, the ancient town may hold the earliest evidence of an agrarian community during the Neolithic Age. Researchers have found the traces of more than 100 plants, remains of sheep, goats, pigs, cattle, and domesticated dogs, along with the discovery of wells that suggest the residents were among the first farmers who both raised and hunted animals. Other clues, including a concentration of fish skeletons, provide evidence that the inhabitants were also some of the first fishermen in the Middle East. Like other ancient settlements, Atlit Yam was lost to the sea. Some scientists blame a volcanic collapse of the eastern side of Sicily's Mount Etna 8,500 years ago for causing a 130-foot tsunami that wiped out the village. Others simply blame climate change for the rise of the water level. Whatever the cause, the clay and sandy sediment and the salty seawater that engulfed Atlit Yam have preserved it as a startlingly clear window into life in the prehistoric world. City beneath the waves. About 170 feet off a beach in Greece's Peloponnese region, an astonishingly intact 5,000-year-old city was discovered in 1904, submerged just 12 feet beneath the surface of the Mediterranean Sea. Now known as Pavlopetri, this Bronze Age city is believed to be the world's oldest known submerged city. Though it wasn't explored at the time of discovery, Pavlopetri was first mapped in 1967, and in 2009 a team of British and Australian scientists used robotics to survey its 9 acres and make a 3D recreation of the city, which can be seen in the stirring BBC documentary City Beneath the Waves. We're essentially bringing a few thousand-year-old city back to life, said John Henderson, PhD, an archaeologist at the University of Nottingham in England, and a member of the Pavlopetri Underwater Archaeology Project. Evidence suggests that during its prime, Pavlopetri was a thriving trading destination with roads, 2-story houses, temples, a cemetery, and a complex water management system. The port city was seemingly influenced by traders and seafarers who came from throughout the Aegean Sea to trade textiles and fashions of the era. Alas, Pavlopetri succumbed to a series of earthquakes that left it below sea level around 1000 BCE. Dark and stormy. Modern Dunwich is a microscopic village on the northeast coast of Suffolk, England, with a population of about 120 people. But in the ancient Anglo-Saxon period, which birthed the legends of King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table, it was a mighty port city at the mouth of the River Blythe. Large and diverse, it was as important in the Middle Ages as London would become in later centuries. By the year 630, Dunwich, sometimes called the Atlantis of England, was a religious center for the region. By 1154, it boasted 19 churches, 2 monasteries, and 2 hospitals. As the city expanded, it rivaled the largest cities of the age, and then in 1286, Dunwich began its stunning demise. A massive storm followed by a series of sea surges and major floods destroyed many of the city's buildings, sweeping 400 houses into the water. Just as devastating, the surges shifted the flow of the River Blythe 2.5 miles away from Dunwich, diverting its harbor traffic by 1328. The destructive erosion continued, eventually washing most of the city into the North Sea, leaving what little is left largely abandoned. One of the few things that remains from Dunwich's storied past is a lone headstone from one of its churches, known to locals as the Last Grave. Nearly 700 years later, archaeologists used sonar cameras to reveal the remains of ancient churches and buildings, along with enough data to detail what once was one of Europe's great cities. Buried treasure. While Atlantis is mythical, there was another prehistoric land that disappeared, but this one has left massive evidence of its existence we can see today. In 2019, researchers completed a 10-year study revealing a continent the size of Greenland that is mostly hidden underwater in the Mediterranean. The only piece that remains above the surface is a strip stretching through the Adriatic Sea and connecting northern Italy's Turin to the heel of Italy's boot-shaped south. About 240 million years ago, the rest of this massive landmass, now called Greater Adria, separated from North Africa, and about 120 million years after that began sliding beneath continental Europe, slipping under the planet's crust and into the mantle. While most of the continent is underwater, sedimentary pieces were scraped off during its migration and now make up European mountain belts, including parts of the Alps. Without realizing it, large numbers of tourists spend their holiday each year on the lost continent of Greater Adria, said Dewey van Hensbergen, PhD, a geology professor at Utrecht University in the Netherlands, whose team identified the precise shape and location of the missing continent. That's the end of that. Let's read another chapter. Why not? Remote access. That was a really short chapter. Mail via mule. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has referred to Supai, Arizona as the most remote community in the lower 48 states, and it's easy to see how this Native American reservation 3,000 feet deep in the Havasu Canyon earned the distinction. The Havasupai tribe has called the area, about 35 miles from the southern rim of the Grand Canyon, home for more than 1,000 years, and getting there hasn't changed much in that time. Inaccessible by road, a helicopter does regularly fly in tourists, but most villagers and the 200 residents make the 8-mile trek on foot or via pack animal. That's what the U.S. Postal Service does. Supai is the only place in the country where the mail carrier travels by mule. The hike isn't for the faint of foot. Supai's semi-arid climate means high temps are in the 90s in the summer, and no water is available en route. Once there, travelers can grab an Indian taco or ice cream at the one small cafe, while taking in the rust-colored Wiglifa rock formations standing sentinel above the village. Another 2-mile hike boasts 5 breathtaking waterfalls, not all that surprising as Havasu means blue-green waters. For guests needing a nap after the journey, there is a small, air-conditioned hotel called the Havasupai Lodge. And camping is also an option, but reservations are required for all guests, so plan ahead. The anti-tourist trap. With around 2,000 visitors per year, Tuvalu in the west central Pacific Ocean is the least visited nation on Earth, according to recent data from the United Nations World Tourism Organization. With its turquoise waters, charming houses on stilts, and ubiquitous coconut trees, it's hardly a bad place to spend time. Temperatures are nearly always in the 80s. Composed of 9 tiny coral islands, the nation's total land mass is less than 10 square miles. It's the world's 4th smallest country. Its narrowest point stretches just 65 feet across. First settled by Samoans in the 14th century, the islands remained largely off the map, literally, until the 1800s, when Christian missionaries came a-converting. By 1916, the islands were folded into the UK's Gilbert and Ellice Islands colony, but Tuvalu was granted independence in 1978. Today, most of the 11,000 residents live on Fongafale, the largest island, which houses the government offices. It's a parliamentary democracy, one bank, and a medical center. It's also the only island with reliable electricity. But what Tuvalu lacks in modern amenities, it more than makes up for in traditional dancing, songs, and wood carvings. But the most pressing reason to visit the nation is that it might not be around much longer. Rising sea levels and eroding beaches caused by climate change are threatening the Tuvalu way of life. Government officials have reported that 2 of the smaller low-lying islands are sinking, and scientists say unless action is taken, the entire nation may be uninhabitable in 50 to 100 years. It would be a great shame for the world to allow that to happen, Prime Minister Annalise Soponga has said. Agreed. Arabian Sands. You've seen it in the movies, an endless sea of ruddy sand extending eons in all directions. The winds whip away footprints as soon as they're made, as if any visitors of the vast desert simply appeared there without any path of entry or egress. Rub al-Khali, or the Empty Quarter, as it's known in the West, is the largest continuous area of sand in the world, covering about 250,000 square miles in a structural basin in the southern Arabian Peninsula. It encompasses a full quarter of Saudi Arabia's total area, but also claims real estate in Yemen, Oman, and the United Arab Emirates. The landscape is comprised of 5 different types of sand dunes, making mobility one more issue in the unforgiving landscape. In the west, the topography boasts areas as high as 2,000 feet above sea level, while the eastern parts dip as low as just 600 feet above sea level. While temperatures can drop down to 50 degrees Fahrenheit in January and February, the average daily high is between 117 degrees and 124 degrees. But hey, at least it's a dry heat. Classified as hyper-arid, the Empty Quarter is one of the world's driest places. With less than 1.2 inches of rainfall per year, the region is unable to support any animals or plant growth. And yet it's not without life. In 1948, the world's largest conventional oil field, Ghawar, was discovered, and of course, refinery operations have been in place ever since. There are also several nomadic Bedouin tribes in the area, including bands of the Al-Mara, the Baniyams, and Baniyaz. Most live at the edge of the desert, close to the few roads. But that wasn't always the case. In the 1990s, archaeologists in the Dhofar region discovered the legendary city of Ubar, which had been mentioned in 1001 Arabian Nights. Seemingly a fort built on a limestone caravan, the long-lost trading post had been buried under drifting sands. British explorer Sir Wilfrid Thesiger, one of the few Westerners to spend a significant amount of time among the local tribes, documented his experiences in 1959's Arabian Sands, widely regarded as one of the greatest travel writing books ever written. The Empty Quarter, was one of the very few places left where I could satisfy an urge to go where others had not been, he wrote. Red Hot Scorchers. Taking a hot selfie took a literal turn in California's Death Valley National Park in California in the summer of 2020. On August 16th, tourists and wowed locals alike lined up to snap shots next to the landmark digital thermometer outside the Furnace Creek Visitor Center, which read 130 degrees. The World Meteorological Organization, or WMO, is still verifying the number, a task that can take months, even years, to figure out. And if it's confirmed, that would make it the hottest reliably recorded temperature on Earth. But wait, wasn't Death Valley's hottest reading 134 degrees back on July 10th, 1913? While this is often cited as the highest temperature recorded, meteorologists including Christopher Burt recently noted the measurements don't add up with other observations at the time, rendering the reading not possible from a meteorological perspective, according to the New York Times. On the other end of the spectrum, 10 things you didn't know about Antarctica. Royal Naval Captain Robert Falcon Scott was one of the first people to visit Antarctica, but he had no love for the harsh, frigid continent. "Great God, this is an awful place," he wrote, after leading the second expedition in history to the South Pole in 1912. But there are some surprising facts about the place. Number 1. At 5.4 million square miles, roughly the size of the United States and Mexico combined, it's the 5th largest continent. Number 2. It's one of the driest places on Earth with such low humidity that snow and ice can't accumulate, leaving the valleys dusty deserts. Number 3. Don't forget your windbreaker. Gusts of up to 200 miles an hour have been recorded. Number 4. Or your long johns. I just saw the penguins here. Oh, cute. Or your long johns. Temperatures range from negative 76 degrees to a balmy 14 degrees, though the record low stands at negative 128.6 degrees. Number 5. And bring a lab coat. Though Antarctica officially has no permanent residents, humans are always around. In the warmer summer months from October to February, around 4,000 scientists and researchers live in the 80 different research stations, though the number dips to a quarter of that in the winter. Number 6. Nobody owns it. Antarctica was discovered in 1820, and with no indigenous population, several countries tried to claim the resource-rich continent. After some spats, peace prevailed, and 12 nations, including the United States, signed the Antarctic Treaty in 1959. The nations agreed all decisions regarding human activity and research must be decided collectively. Since then, 41 other countries have joined the treaty, and they've added a ban on mining and strict regulations around fishing. Number 7. It would make for a great water park. Antarctica contains nearly 70% of the world's fresh water and 90% of the freshwater ice. It also boasts valuable minerals as well as the world's largest known coal field, though extraction isn't economically viable because of the ice and the Antarctic Treaty. Number 8. In 1978, Argentine Army Captain Jorge Palma and his wife Sylvia welcomed son Emilio at the Esperanza base at the tip of the Antarctic Peninsula, the first of 10 recorded births on the continent. Number 9. There are several operating post offices on the continent. In fact, one of the most popular tourist destinations is a UK one at Port Lockroy dubbed the Penguin Post Office, because a colony of 3,000 Gentoo penguins take up residence in the area every summer. There's also a small museum attached. The birds don't deliver the mail, however, and appropriate global postage is required. Number 10. In addition to the Port Lockroy Post Office and Museum, Antarctic history hunters can check out the hut Captain Scott and his men used during their explorations in the early 1900s. The building, which has been designated a historic site, offers virtual tours. Easter Island, as if you didn't need to be told from the picture. Oh, the stories the Moai could tell if they could break their silence. Easter Island's giant stone statues, at once stoic and seductive, have long held the spirits and secrets of the ancient Rapa Nui people who settled the island around 800 CE. Each Moai, whether tall and upright, fallen or standing soldier-like, conceals numerous mysteries. Polynesian settlers navigated by the stars to this dot of land in the middle of the Pacific that they eponymously named Rapa Nui. Located 2,250 miles northwest of Chile, Rapa Nui, renamed Easter Island after the day Europeans arrived in 1722, is the world's most remote inhabited island. How and why the nearly 900 rock stars, averaging 13 feet tall and 14 tons each, were built remains an enigma. Theories maintain the Moai were created to honor ancestors and chiefs by embodying the spirits of these deified figures. The Rapa Nui likely used basalt stone picks to carve the Moai from porous rock, then transported and erected the monoliths with rollers made from logs and rope made from plant fibers. Native islanders, though, believe the Moai, steered by mana or magic, walked themselves across the island. Pre-pandemic, 80,000 annual visitors stood in awe at the Rano Ruraka Quarry, a Moai graveyard of sorts. Here the stone-faced giants exist in various states, many broken, half-carved, buried up to their chins, all revealing an abrupt halt to their creation. The Rapa Nui's demise is as much of a mystery as the Moai they built. Claims point to an environmental disaster of the people's own making, civil warfare, or the arrival of Europeans. One thing is for certain, the Rapa Nui were innovative, spiritual architects of their own lives on Earth and beyond, their eyes fixed always on the stars. Sovereign states? Even if you could kill it on Jeopardy when the category is geography, you've likely never heard of these countries. No, your atlas isn't missing them. These are what are commonly referred to as micronations, small geographic entities that claim to be sovereign states, despite no legal recognition from the outside world. Many have the accoutrement of statehood, including flags, coats of arms, national anthems, and official websites detailing their often fictitious histories and ordinances. Some grant citizenship, issue passports, and even print their own currency. Here, three of the most noteworthy. I think this one's the best known. The Principality of Sealand. There it is. One of the best known and, like I said, and most notorious micronations, this maritime island was founded in 1966 when retired British Army Major Paddy Roy Bates and his family set up house on Ruff's Tower, an abandoned Royal Navy fort in the North Sea 7 miles off the English coast. First used for pirate radio broadcasts, the BBC had a monopoly on the airwaves at the time. The Bates family soon proclaimed Sealand a sovereign nation. Sorry for my squeaky chair. An absurdist and fanciful as Sealand seemed, the British took it seriously. Ian Urbina, one of the few people to have visited the industrial concrete platform of a country, wrote in The Atlantic, declassified UK documents from the late 1960s reveal that Sealand prompted considerable fretting among officers who feared that another Cuba was being created. Though officials ultimately nixed the idea of bombing Sealand, British government and various mercenary groups have made multiple attempts over the years to take the nation by force. All have been thwarted by the Bates family. The Republic of Molossia. Like Sealand, this micronation, located in Dayton, Nevada, was founded by an individual, Kevin Baugh. It reportedly originally began as a school project. On a website detailing its history, including a brief overthrow when it was renamed Kikassia, Molossia lists quirky laws banning spinach and making it illegal to wear cowboy boots unless you already own at least 2 cows, or to play percussion instruments in any bathroom. The Dominion of West Florida. Other micronations were established for political reasons, such as the Dominion of British West Florida. It was founded in 2005 by the self-designated Robert VII, Duke of Florida, who claims he inherited the peerage in 1969. Based on an arcane and universally denounced interpretation of Spain's one-time dominion over Florida, the country's mission to be reinstated as a member of the British Commonwealth. Oh, and that's the end of that, but I think that's a good stopping point. Next time we'll read about ghost towns. Thank you so much for watching. There's the Moai. I hope you found this video relaxing and educational, and I hope that you have a very, very good